Hi, I'm Martha from Bee Quilting, and welcome to the 2021 Block of the Month program. This is the traditional pieced option. It's from a pattern called Chocolatier, and the pattern is by Gen X Quilters. It's been modified so that we can use it for a collection of fabric called Favorite Things by Shayla Wolf of Sassafras Lane Designs for Wyndham Fabric. Couple things, housekeeping items that I want to emphasize. First of all, there will be sew-along days. You will pick your fabric up every month on the 15th or any time after, and then about 2 weeks later there'll be a sew-along day. Watch the calendar and we'll be sending out emails to you so that you're aware of them. What we're asking is that you arrive at 1, 3, or 5 on those sew-along days and plan on just a 2-hour time frame. It would be best if there's any cutting to do, if there's any prep work, that you've read the directions and maybe even given it a try. So when you arrive here and you have help, you know what it is that you want to ask or that you're having trouble with. It's not meant to be instructional, like from beginning to end. Watch the videos and that should give you an idea what's going to happen and what it is you need to do. If any of you did our mystery quilt last year, you know that there were prizes along the way. That makes it kind of fun. So when you finish a block, if you finish it on time, in other words, by the time you come to pick up your next set, bring those blocks in, and we'll let you put your name in the prize bucket. We'll be choosing for prizes along the way throughout the year, and then there's a party at the end, and there'll be a big prize, and the big prize is free long arming on this quilt. There'll be other prizes at the party as well, so you want your name in that bucket as many times as possible. We'll give you some other opportunities throughout the year to put your name in the bucket other than just finishing your blocks. The other thing I want to emphasize to you is it's very important that your blocks turn out to be the 6.5 inches that they need to be when you're done. So in order to assure that, you need to know that you're using 1/4 inch seam allowances. There's a really easy way to test that. We've given you some strips in your first packet to do that. And there's a video, and if you look at the welcome letter, you can see how to get to that YouTube video. It's done by a lady named Marty Michelle, who has been quilting forever and has written lots and lots of patterns, and she has a really interesting idea about this. So I want you to watch that video, and I want you to test your 1/4 inch. You need to know that your blocks are going to come out finished at the right size. It's very important for this quilt. So watch her video, and she has a really interesting suggestion that every time you sit down for a new session of sewing, you test and make sure that you're coming out with your 1/4 inch being correct. So you're going to end up with all these little blocks that she has you make. And so you can take those blocks and save them and turn them into a scrappy quilt. Or if you don't want to do that, you can bring them to the bee and we'll have a basket for you to put them in, and eventually we'll turn them into a scrappy quilt to donate somewhere. I'm going to be sewing on the M7. It's my absolute favorite machine in the shop. The reason it is I love the presser foot. It's called an HP foot, a high performance foot, and from the needle to this edge is exactly 1/4 of an inch. I've actually done Marty Michelle's thing to test it, and it does come out well. Keep in mind though that for 1/4 inch seams to come out 1/4 inch, you need not only to be sewing at a 1/4 inch, but your raw edges need to be even. So use those two guides, 1/4 inch and raw edges together, to make your blocks come out to be the right size. Okay, your things are going to arrive in little packets like this. For the first 8 months, you will be making 2 blocks every month. And these are the 2 blocks that you're going to make this month. This one is called an Irish chain string. The chain string is actually the middle portion. These are 4 patches. So this has the chain string plus some 4 patches. We're going to do that one first. It's really a fun and interesting block. And then the second block is a log cabin, although it's slightly modified, because a traditional log cabin is usually one color on one side and a different color on the other side. So this one is the log cabin technique, but it's not put together as a traditional log cabin. So we're going to put the log cabin aside for right now, and we're going to go with with the Irish chain string. Okay, and in your packet, you should have a little piece of white paper that is exactly 3.5 inches square. You're going to use that for this section. And then you should have 4 pieces that are rectangles. These rectangles are here. If you notice, we've cut them a little oversized this way to help you to be able to make your block come out correctly. And then you have just some long pieces of fabric. Okay, these, the longer ones, and they're thinner, they're only 1 inch wide, are what you're going to use here. These you're going to turn into the 4-patch. So these shorter but slightly wider pieces, which I believe are 1¼ inches wide, are what we're going to do. And we're going to do the 4-patch first. So I'm going to take and I'm going to set these aside because that's for the Irish, the chain string. And we're going to do this first. And the very first thing we're going to do is sew these 2 together. All right, and we're going to turn it into just a long strip but wider. So we're going to sew it along the long edge, and remember, we want our raw edges together, and we want to be right exactly at 1/4 inch. All right, on this machine, remember, 1/4 inch is right here along the edge of the presser foot. So I'm going to focus my attention along the edge of the presser foot. Okay, and I'm going to keep checking that my raw edges are right together. Okay, and remember, you don't have to sew fast. It's not a race, and there's no prizes for being the first one down to the end of the piece. These pieces might not come out exactly together at the end. It doesn't matter. What you're mostly going for is the raw edges together and the 1/4 inch seam allowance, because when we open this up and press it, we want this to be exactly 2 inches wide. Okay, and you do not need the back stitch at the beginning or the end because you're going to subcut this up. So once you subcut it, you don't need. So we're going to go over here to the iron. And we're going to press this seam. First, I'm going to press it open to get a nice flat piece. And then I'm going to press it towards the orange. And when I press it towards the orange, that will mean that it will nest. Okay. I'm going to check and make sure that I don't have any folds here, that this is all laying flat. Okay, now I'm going to press it towards the orange, and then I'm going to use the folding pen. And the folding pen is something we have recently discovered at the Bee. And what it does is it will make this lay down really flat. So I'm going to rub this right on my stitching line here. Makes it all just a little bit wet. And now I'm going to press it. Okay, now I'm going to check to be sure. Press it from the right side also. Now I'm going to check to be sure that this is 2 inches wide. Okay. This piece should be 2 inches wide. Okay, it should be 1 inch on either side of the seam allowance. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this smaller ruler because I think it's easier. And I'm going to line up a line right along my seam line, and then I'm going to trim off one end so I get one nice end. Now I'm going to cut this into 1 1/4 inch pieces. Okay, and I'm going to put a line of the ruler on my seam line, and the edge at the 1 1/4 inch, so that I know it's nice and square. I'm going to cut it at 1 1/4. Okay, and I'm going to do that, and what I need is 8 pieces. I'm going to keep cutting. Till I have 8 pieces. That's 6. That's 7. I almost cut that last one wrong. That's 8. Okay, now they're all towards the orange, but because this is what I'm going to do, put them together so they look like a checkerboard, as you see when I flip it over, I can nest these seams together. So this one's going this way and this one's going this way. So I want to bring my raw edges right together, and I want to feel that they almost locked in place. Okay? And if you're a little leery, you can run a pin along here to be sure. And what should happen is the pin should be on the stitching line on both sides. Okay? That's really locked in there very nicely. So we're going to go back, and we're going to stitch this at 1/4 inch. Check to be sure my raw edges are together, and that I'm right at the 1/4 inch. Okay. Now usually we would think this would be bad to be headed toward that, but I'm going to hold that down, and if I need to, I can use, I usually use the seam ripper, but this will work to hold this down. I'm not going to feed this under the needle, but I am going to use it to be toward it. And it's good that we're going toward that, because that sort of pushes the two seams together. Okay?
You show which way it was under your needle again, a little bit. No, I mean up close. We can see which way the seam was going.
Oh, this seam was this way, this seam was down.
Okay.
So I was headed toward this, and that's actually the better way to be, but it doesn't always work out. So when I open it up, look what happens. I've got a perfect intersection. Okay, now the last step for this is to go over here and to press this seam open. And you'll see when we press it open, we've got a really nice, and I'm going to put a little bit of my folding pen and be even crisper. See how nice and flat that lays now? All right, now we need to make 3 more just like this. So we'll be right back after we get 3 more made, and we'll move on to the string part of the Irish chain, okay? Welcome back. I now have all 4 of my 4 patches done. Okay, and they're all pressed nice and flat. And now we need to make sure that they measure 2 inches. And so you want to put them on the ruler, make sure that you are along all the edges, and look, your intersection should be along these lines on your ruler. And then you know that they're exactly the right size. Okay. We're going to set these aside, and we're going to start doing the string along, which can be really fun. And you have 3 pieces of fabric, a white one, a yellow one, and an orange one. Okay, and we need to make sure that the salvages are cut off. So I'm going to trim the salvages. Okay.
Just whacking or
I'm lining it up. All right, look. I want this to be, this is a 1-inch strip, so I want 1 inch nice and straight on there, and then getting rid of it. Okay, I don't have any more salvages, so I don't have to worry about that. And then I need my 3.5-inch little piece of paper. All right? So this is pretty easy, and you can do this any way you want. I started kind of with yellow in the middle on this one, but you don't have to. You can start with white if you want to. You're going to probably want to use the colors fairly evenly, but where you start or what you start with doesn't matter. This time I'll start with orange, okay? And what you're going to do is you're going to take the orange piece and lay it right side up on the diagonal of the piece. But you don't have to worry that you're exactly in the middle. It's not that important. You just want to be approximately in the middle. All right? So right side up on the piece of paper. Then I'm going to take whatever color I want to use next, and I'm going to put it right side down over this piece. And I'm going to match up my raw edges. Okay. And what's going to happen is I'm going to sew here at 1/4 inch. All right, now, if you were using a 1/4 inch foot with a guide, you're not going to be able to use that because the paper is going to keep the guide from going up and on here. So you're going to have to use a different foot that does not have a guide. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out here, and I'm going to sew through both pieces of fabric and the piece of paper. Okay, and I'm going to make my stitch length even smaller. I'm going to take it down to 1.3 because I want it to perforate this paper so that I'm going to be able to pull the paper off real easily. Okay, keep your raw edges together. And I want to keep sewing till I know I've sewn off the paper. Okay, I'm going to stop at this point. Okay, and now I'm going to cut with the scissors that I don't have. I'm going to cut this tail off because I'm going to reuse these pieces. And I'm going to cut it off, but I want there to be extra. See, I have extra here and extra here. Okay, now I'm going to go over here to the iron. And I'm going to press this. And then I'm going to press this second piece I put on, the white piece. And I'm going to press it flat. And I want to be sure that it's nice and flat. And don't worry about this. That's off the paper. It's on the paper. That's why I said you want to sew till you're off the paper. Okay? So now I can put another piece here. So I think I'm going to use the yellow. And I'm going to line the yellow up with the white. So this is my first piece. This is my second piece. Now I'm adding my third piece. Okay. Same thing, raw edges together. I want to start off the paper and sew onto the paper. That way I know for sure that I'm covering the paper. That's what's important, that I get the paper covered. Okay, and I'm going to sew till I'm off the paper. Okay, I'm now off the paper. Okay, now I'm going to cut this piece. And I'm going to go press this. You just keep doing the same thing. Adding a piece, pressing, adding a piece, pressing. Okay. I think I'll use orange again. Now I can shorten it up a little because now my paper is way down here. So I don't have to sew nearly as far. Under the presser foot, I'm going to get rid of these threads. Okay, keep my edges together. Okay, and I'm starting off the paper and sewing onto the paper. Alright, I'm off the paper so I can cut it. Now I'm going to press this one, and I probably need one more piece, and that will cover this corner. Then I'm going to turn it around, and I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to finish going this way. Okay, we'll stop there. I'll finish this and come back and show you how to trim it. Hello again, we're back. I've finished it looks like a mess, doesn't it? Okay, and if you notice I need a little more yellow on this end. It doesn't matter. It's just gonna look like a really neat square when we're done. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna flip it over and we're gonna use the white paper to help us to trim this down. So I'm gonna lay my ruler right along the edge of the white paper, and I'm gonna trim all this off. Oh, and this is what I had left. That's all I have left of my strips. Okay, notice I used most of the white, but it doesn't matter. You can put it together any way you want. You have to press pretty hard because you're going through lots of layers here. You want to be right at the edge of the paper, which can be a little hard to see sometimes, so. Okay, last side. And that's what it looks like, and see, it is different than the other one I made. This one's got a little more white in it. This one had a little more yellow. So you do whatever you want. Okay, this is all scraps, and now we just pull the paper off. And it comes off pretty easily because we use that really small stitch. And what's exciting is next thing is we're going to build our block, which means we're getting close to the end. And we'll have the first block of our block of the month done. Okay, try to get as much of the paper off as you can. If you have a tweezers, that can help. One more piece. And there we've got it. Okay, now we're going to build our block. We're going to build our block using our 4-patch. Okay, and you can turn these whatever way you want. You can turn them so that the yellow is on the outside edges. You don't have to make them all the same. I'm going to make mine with all the orange on the outside edges. And then these pieces go in between. And now I'm going to cough. And the in between, notice that we've overcut these for you a little bit. Actually, we've overcut them quite a bit, but that's okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to sew this together, and this together. And when I sew these, I want this bottom edge to be even. So I'm going to match this bottom edge here. And I'm going to match the top, it's probably the opposite for you, the top edge here, so that I have some to trim later when I square up this block. So I'm going to sew this to this, and I want this edge to be together. So I'm going to sew that there. Okay, raw edges together and right on the edge of my foot. Or at your guide, or however you've determined you get the best 1/4 inch seam allowance. Again, I'm not back stitching because all of these are going to be sewn over again. All right, there's that piece, and now I'm going to take my other one, my other 4 patch, and I'm going to sew it at this edge, and I want it to end up like that. So raw edges together down here. Okay. I'm going to do the same thing with this bottom part, and I'm going to sew this middle together like this. Raw edges right together, and these edges should all come out the same. Now, I do not want these to flip up. I want these to stay down the way they are. So since they're all going this way, I'm going to flip this over and sew from this side so that I'm not sewing against them. All right, now I'm going to sew the other one on the other side. And again, I want to sew with, see, I don't want this to happen, so I'm going to flip it over and sew from this side. Edges right together. Yep. I got a little off there. All right. Now, need to sew this very last piece. Except I think I sewed this. Where's my... Okay. All right. This goes here. Then we'll be ready to press. And it's important which way we press because we want to press so that nesting will happen when we sew our rows together. This piece is going to go here. Make sure that my orange corners, are coming out right. Last seam, and we're going to have nice rows. All right, now what we're going to do is we're going to press the seams so that they're going out towards the yellow squares here. Okay? So I want these to lay nice and flat. Okay, I'm going to flip it over and make sure that they're nice and flat, that I don't have any folds. Because remember, folds can distort the size of your block as well. Okay, and now I'm going to go back and I'm going to use my folding pen to make this lay really nice and flat. There's a lot of bulk here, so the folding pen can really be helpful. Again, check the right side. Okay, so because I have these going out this way, I want these to go in toward the middle. That way, when I sew these rows together, they will nest nicely. I'm going to press these open first and then to the side. Everything's flat. All right, now these I'm going to press toward the yellow triangle, rectangle, it's not triangle. I'm also going to get rid of this thread. Okay, now see, these seams are going in, these seams are going out, so these have to go in as well. But I'm going to do what I did before and press them open first to be sure that they lay flat. I didn't do that on the middle section where the string was because it's so bulky that it would have been difficult to do. Okay, now I'm going to go and press them toward the yellow rectangle. I'm going to use my folding pen. All right, that's how it's going to go together. Last step, I'm going to sew this to this, and I want my seams to nest. And nesting, the easiest thing to do is to feel it. You can tell when it's nice and flat. And I am going to pin this because I want to know that I'm starting in the correct spot here. All right, I'm going to put this under presser foot, raw edges together. Right on the edge. Again, you don't need to backstitch. Now that I've got it started, I'm going to take this pin out and just use my finger to be sure that it feels like it's nesting correctly. I'm past that seam, I'm going to stop and I'm going to do the same thing here. Feel for the nesting. I'm going to hold this here and I want this to go under my presser foot without, so I help it a little bit. Okay, hopefully our seams have nested. This one is perfect. This one is off a little, so I will take that out afterwards and fix it. I won't do that now while we're gonna go ahead and finish this block. But I will fix it before I sometimes that was the second one I sewed. So what I'll do is I'm going to take it out to about here, and then I'm going to sew from here this way and see if it doesn't nest better that way. That pin doesn't want to work. That one does. All right. See it. It feels like that's nesting. Okay, let's see if this one went better. Yeah, this one went much better. See, we have perfect corners, perfect intersections. Okay, we're going to stop here. I'm going to take this out. Actually, I'll take it out and then we'll come back and I'll show you. I'm going to sew from this side and see if I can get it to
Ironing mat, we can't see.
You can't see? Okay. Okay, see? Let's see. Take a pin. See, this is where that seam is, and here's where this seam is. So I'm going to take out from here to about the middle. So we'll stop here while I rip and then come back and see if I can. I've got this ripped about halfway out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to nest this seam, and remember, you can do it the best way by feeling it. And then I'm going to put one pin in so that I know where to start this. And now I'm going to sew from this direction toward the middle. So I'm going to start here and sew. So I'm sewing toward the seam that was a problem into the middle. And hopefully it will be matched up better this time. Remember, it's very important to keep your raw edges together and your 1/4 inch seam, because otherwise your blocks will not be the correct size when you go to put them together. Okay, I've now sewn over where I had sewn before, so I'm going to sew back a couple stitches, and hopefully we'll have a better matched seam this time. Nope, it's still off. Well, at this point we're going to move on because I want to show you how to square this up. To be very honest, I would take this out again and keep working at this, but I'm not going to now because I need for you to see what we're going to do. Okay.
If you were going to keep working at it, what would you do? Same
Okay,
thing over
I
again?
would take this out this time, and this time I would put a pin in there, and I would sew over the pin.
Okay.
Okay? So instead of that, let's move on because we need for this to, for you to see what to
If you're going to
do.
sew over a pin, the problem becomes your presser foot wants to push the pin, so you sometimes get a wonky 1/4 inch seam, but you can always go back
Right.
and sew the 1/4 inch seam once your problem area is anchored together.
Okay, now I'm going to press this seam toward the outside because this has so much bulk that it's going to lay better if I do this. If I try to press it open, then I'm putting the bulky part on top of the bulky part, and if same thing this way. So I'm going to press it this way. Okay, and this one this way.
Okay, and why are your edges uneven here?
Okay, remember we overcut these? I told you that that I cut them for you too big so that you would be able to have a little bit extra to square up. Because when I made this block, these tended to be too short, and I think the reason was because of all the bulk from this string square. So I decided that the easiest thing would be to give you a little extra so that now you'll be able to square this up nicely. Okay, I'm going to go back and use my folding pen, especially right where it's the bulkiest here, where all these intersections are. Before I square this up. Remember, all the blocks are going to be squared up to 6.5 inches. Means they'll finish at 6 when they're completely surrounded by other blocks. Okay. Now that I have this nice and flat, we're going to go over here, and the easiest way to square it up is if you have a 6.5 inch ruler. If you do, then you can very easily lay it on here, and I can see that this is nice and square by following around the center block here. Okay? And now, as you can see, there's really very little room for any kind of error here. But because we gave ourselves a little bit extra, we can trim this off now. Not at my best angle here for cutting. All right, now I have a 6.5 inch block. All right, we'll be back in a minute. We'll clean this up and be back in a minute with the log cabin block.